I have a friend in Israel, my nephew Arthur Steingart's rabbi, Rabbi Bill Burke, who has been living in Israel for a while, and over lunch on my previous sabbatical, he said to me, I attended services in Tel Aviv at an open-aired Friday night gathering called Beit Tfilah Yisraeli, the House of Prayer of Israel. It's done for the non-religious. 1,000 people gathered together on Fridays in the amphitheater at the port. And there we sat together, watching the sun go down over the Mediterranean. And in that experience of what some call secular prayer, I learned the meaning of Shabbat. What I learned is that Shabbat is falling in love with the world again. There, as the sun was setting over the Mediterranean, people put their arms around each other. And then in Hebrew, they sang, "What a Wonderful World." Louis would have approved. Well, you don't need to be looking out over the setting of the sun in Tel Aviv to fall in love with the world again. You can do it here. You can do it now. Friday night, every Friday night, wherever one is called to pause. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that in each pause, I hear the call. In the pause of a Friday night, any Friday night, we have the opportunity to see a sunset. Rabbi Harold Kushner, he noted that if you are present, every sunset is different. Every sunset can take your breath away. It's not always the case for human achievement, though they too can take your breath away. But he pointed out that the first time that Apollo went to the moon, everybody watched live. Second time, it was on the evening news. The third time, they had to simulate putting a golf ball in order for it to warrant being put on the news again. Been there, done that. But if we pause to count our blessings, to see the world with radical amazement, in that moment, we are enlivened. And so just pause for a moment. I have a lot to pause over. I have all three of my children home tonight in honor of my 30th Yom Kippur at CBI. So all night I am just kvelling. But just take a moment to look around this room, to see if you're blessed to have family with you. What a gift that is. What a gift it is to return on Yom Kippur to the rhythm of an ancient people and to feel its vitality, alive and fresh. You know, those human achievements that I mentioned that we sometimes take for granted, they too are worthy of celebration. For most of our history as Homo sapien, there have been three major obsessions, three dangers: hunger through famine, plagues and infectious disease, war and violence. Shabbat is the opportunity not to solve problems, but to understand how good our world is. Listen to some statistics. 2 examples of how the world of disease today is different. In the 14th century, the Black Death, often blamed on Jews, and actually due to a flea-dwelling bacterium, killed more than 1/4 of the population of Eurasia. In England, 4 out of 10 people died. In Florence, Italy, with a population of 100,000, half perished. People were helpless when these diseases began to spread. Moving forward, another example, 16th century Mexico, after the Spanish conquest. Those Spanish conquerors came with diseases that the locals had never been exposed to and had no immunity. In Mexico, in the 16th century, there were 22 million people. It plummeted to less than 2 million. Smallpox. In 1967, 15 million people were infected. I always think of Yitzchak, the smallpox, not polio. Smallpox. Keep my diseases straight. 15 million, and that year 2 million died. In 2014, the World Health Organization reported that not a single person in the world was either infected or killed by smallpox, and stopped its vaccination program. There are still new and scary diseases: SARS, bird flu, Ebola. But each of these in recent years has been largely contained. AIDS is now preventable and treatable. It is more than 25 years that Magic Johnson was diagnosed as HIV positive, and thank God he's still well. Today, the vast majority of people die from non-infectious illnesses, such as cancer, heart disease, or simply old age. And doctors are saying that soon to come are nanorobots that will patrol our bloodstream, identifying illnesses and eliminating pathogens and cancerous cells. Consider, in 2001, it cost $100 million to sequence just one person's genome. Today, you can get your genome sequenced fully for $1,000. Medicine, human ingenuity, has created in the area of medicine dramatic strides. War and violence. Ancient agricultural societies were filled with violence. They were responsible for 15% of all deaths. In the 20th century, with 2 world wars, only 5% died as a result of violence. In the first decade of the 21st century, human violence was only responsible for 1% of global mortality. 2012, about 56 million people died throughout the world. 600 died from human violence, war, 120,000 from crime, and crime another 500,000. Wait, let me do this over. In 2012, 56 million people died. Of those 56 million who died, 620,000 died from human violence, 120,000 from war, and 500,000 from crime around the world. In that same year, 2012, 800,000 people in the world committed suicide, and 1.5 million died of diabetes. To quote Yuval Harari, the historian, sugar is now more dangerous than gunpowder. We read the news, we get the news more quickly than ever before, but context, there is actually less violence now than there was in the past. Yuval Harari says, if you look at the papers these last 20 years, they've so much focused on terrorism. And he writes as follows: how do terrorists manage to dominate the headlines and change the political situation throughout the world? By provoking their enemies to overreact. In essence, terrorism is a show. Terrorists are like a fly seeking to destroy a china shop. The fly is so weak that it cannot budge even a single teacup. So it finds a bull, gets inside its ear, and starts buzzing. The bull goes wild with fear and anger and destroys the china shop. By themselves, he emphasizes, he writing in Israel, terrorists are too weak to drag us back to the Middle Ages and reestablish the law of the jungle. They may provoke us, but in the end, it all depends on our reactions. War and violence, plagues, and infectious disease. One more, hunger. Famines of the past wiped out huge swaths of humanity. Take, for example, the end of the 17th century. In Europe, 15% of France perished from starvation in the last decade of the 17th century. In Finland, in 1 year alone, 1696, as much as a third of its population died from starvation. Only a few decades ago, tens of millions of Chinese starved to death during the Great Leap Forward. Today, China is free from famine. In 2010, famine and malnutrition killed about 1 million people, whereas obesity killed 3 million. It is the first time in history that more people are likely to die from too much food rather than too little. Hakarat HaTov in Hebrew means recognition of the good. Tonight, because it's Shabbat, even more so, it is our opportunity to count our blessings, to pause and see progress, to be aware that it is a troubled world, it is a broken world, and yet on Shabbat we are called Hakarat HaTov, to experience the world as whole, as good, to see the achievements, to pause and see that sunset. It is gratefulness, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, it is gratefulness that makes the soul great. I'm still selling. Born to love, for you, for the right price of only your time. 5 conversations with friends. We even got in this week. Squeeze ball, born to love. But I mention it, and on the way out tonight, there's a place you can take your name off a sticker, and you can become a group to talk about what it means to love. A good Shabbos activity. You only need one other person to be a group. Many of our groups, this is year 3 of small groups, are 6 to 8 people who get together once a week to have these 5 conversations, my summer homework. But I mention it because at the back of this booklet is a gratitude journal. It's blank. It has some quotes. It's blank for you to fill in, because when we take the time to count our blessings, whether on Friday night or consciously, a one sentence to get up in the morning and to say, I am grateful for, and what pops in that moment to write it down, is to begin and live your day with an open heart, feeling blessed. Gratefulness is what makes the soul great. Back to What a Wonderful World. The song was composed by 2 American Jews, George Weiss and Bob Thiel. It was written during a summer called the Long Hot Summer of 1967. Riots began that summer, race riots in Detroit that spread to 159 cities. In its first, the two composers, Thiel and Weiss, said, Louis Armstrong, we want him to sing this song. He's the perfect ambassador to restore relations between white people like us and the African American community. When that song came out, there were many who scoffed. They said it's too sweet. It only reached 116 that year in the U.S. music charts. At the same time, it reached #1 in England. And it would later, of course, go on to become a widely sung song, a cover by such diverse musical types: Roy Clark, Joey Ramone, Celine Dion, Rod Stewart, and Ziggy Marley. Louis Armstrong was close to 67 that summer of 67. And at a concert that year, when the song was new, he introduced it by saying the following. Smiling because I got this from an article and it said, do it in Louis' voice, but imagine as I read. He said to the audience, some of you young folks been saying to me, "Hey, Pops, what do you mean, what a wonderful world? How about all them wars all over the place? You call them wonderful?" And then he went on, "But how about listening to old Pops for a minute? Seems to me it ain't the world that's so bad, but what we're doing to it. And all I'm saying is, see what a wonderful world it would be if only we'd give it a chance. Love, baby, love." That's the secret. I invite you to rise as Missy Klang leads us in singing "What a Wonderful World."
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, "How do you do?" They're really saying, "I love you." I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Ribono Shel Olam, Master of the universe, thank you.